Hi, this is a podcast of sorts. It was motivated by a video that I saw on YouTube that touches on another story that goes back to the days when I was thinking about buying Calypso, a C7 Corvette. And back then I was seeing the trends and the direction that the automobile industry was going in. And so I thought about what my next car was going to be. Was the C7 a little premature? Was it the right timing? All those factors were coming into my decision because I wasn't having any problem with my C5 at the time. And it was a good car. It was probably the most reliable car I've ever owned up until Calypso so far. And so, like I said, this topic that got brought up in the last couple of weeks, and specifically by the YouTube video, yeah, I think I needed to do something, and it's falling into this thing here that could be considered a podcast. And oops, interruption there. But anyway, I may be sharing this with John Riley, the John Riley Project, and his podcast, because this also is a topic that is near and dear to his heart. And I'm going to share it with him, and he can do what he wants with it. Maybe even talk on the topic or use the video or, something to that effect. But I'm nowhere near his class of doing a podcast. I mean, I think you can tell right now that this is being done on Zoom with the fake or the electronic green screen effect, as I use that to emphasize. And this is my background that I use for Zoom conference calls that I have with work and other things. So anyway, a lot of factors coming into play here. So let me just jump ahead to the video I saw lately that broaches the topic that we Corvette fans are thinking about based on what's happened in the news. So not going to beat around the bush anymore. This is the topic at hand. So you can see from the background now that, and this is the freeze frame picture of the video that, let's see, lasts 8 minutes and 8 seconds. So it's a short video, and I'll give you the link down in the comments section down below here. Just look for it. I'll give you the link for this video. But it says it's all over Corvette. Well, is it? Corvette's gone through 8 generations now, starting out in 1953. So I want to cover that part in this video or this podcast because starting in 1953, I was 3 years old. So this topic parallels my entire life and my love of Corvettes. So this video that, again, I'm referring to was inspired by has to do with the possibility that the Corvette is going to be an EV. And an EV type of vehicle is very near and dear to John Riley's heart. He has an EV, he's got a solar system, he uses the charger. I mean, he's full tilt for promoting electronic vehicles. I mean, he's even got a side podcast thing where he talks about the charging stations. Like, people want to know where the gas stations are, where the charging stations are. So, yeah, he may pick up on this. I don't know. I'm going to offer it to him and see what happens. But yeah, I could see the direction taking place with first going to the mid-engine in the C8 from the C7. I mean, back when the C7 was being talked about, there were rumors that it could be, in the early days, it could be a mid-engine. But yeah, they made that evolutionary step because if you go back to the 1953, that started Zora Guntoff's desire to do a mid-engine car in the very early years. So how does that parallel my desire cars, my love of cars? Let's go off. Let's take that and go down that path. Here I am. I'm thinking I was 3 years old when this picture was taken, and it clearly shows my love of A, convertibles, and two, cars in general. Christmas morning, stockings hung. I still have that stocking, by the way, that's hanging on the doorknob. But anyway, that's me in I like to think it's 1953. I'm going to say that because it marries up so well with the first year of Corvettes. So let's talk about that for a second. The 1953 Corvette. So let's talk about the 1953 Corvette just for a minute. The Corvette came out in 1953 primarily because a guy by the name of Zora Anton Duntov, I think I'm saying that right. Zora is the important part, but he saw the love of sports cars that the American serviceman had seen coming out of World War II in Europe. And he felt that an American sports car, it was time. So he pushed GM hard, and lo and behold, the birth of the the Corvette came into play. Now, Freudian slip there, I talked about the C6. Zora's impact on Corvette is recognized in two steps within each generation in the modern era. They came out with the concept of the Z06. Back in 53, that would have been the conversion from a six-cylinder into the V8s, and then the varying horsepower there. So the Z06, the Z comes from Zora. It's with every generation for the last several generations. But then at the end of the model year or the generation, they come out with the ZR1, which is the killer Corvette for that generation. Again, the Z is from Zora. So, but keep in mind here, between 1953, which is when this commercial was shot, and I was 3 and watching on a black and white TV, there was no real connection there. The next connection came for me thanks to Rick Croto. And I'm going to do a crossover fade here to Rick Croto's impact in 1964. All right, you can read about Rick on the People page as well. So here's the commercial for the 1964 Corvette, and yeah, get position here. So yeah, the big styling change was back there in the Stingray form, and I think this is the generation where they came up with the name Stingray. I'm not 100% sure, but when that evolutionary step came out, and a convertible. Oop, let me readjust here so you can see that's a convertible. But the 64 Corvette was the first one that I rode in, and courtesy of Rick Croto. And you can read about that on the People page of my website. But it was, again, another generation, and I was now aware of Corvettes. And did I have the ability to buy one then? No. I had just coming up on my enlistment. I was a 14-year-old kid. I didn't have a car. The first car that I got was my dad's car. He gave it to me for a graduation present in 1969. So from 1964, all I could do was to 1969, all I can do was be envious. All right. Oh, by the way, there's the mention of the increasing horsepower over within the model year. So it goes from 250 up to 365. So in 1964, out of the 327 cubic inch engine, it had 3 evolutionary steps. And they all came out in subsequent years. And that's all the Zora impact. It's an intergenerational movement. So let's flip over to me again and where I was in 1969. This is me and my 63 Chevy 2. And you can see I'm in cap and gown. So I just graduated from Lincoln Senior High. My dad gave me the car, but not the title. He gave me the car as a graduation present. Big deal. A week later, I was in the Navy in boot camp. So the car didn't go with me. The car didn't go with me until after boot camp. So when I came home from boot camp leave, I got the title to the car. I had a delightful 2 weeks there in Rhode Island before I started going to school at Great Lakes. And Great Lakes prepared me for my duty stations, first in Imperial Beach, and then later on to Hawaii. By the way, the Woodstock story takes place in this car. So, oops, pointing. Where I got a point here, right there. There's my 63 Chevy 2 with all the beautiful glory of green screen, courtesy of Zoom. I'm on the cheap here, folks. Anyway, so this led to the Austin Healey. And here's me with my Austin Healey. 63 Austin Healey. 3000 Mark IV, I think is what they called it. But the big thing was it had a 4 speeds with electronic overdrive that went into overdrive in 3rd and 4th gears. So there was an electric switch on the dashboard. The first hint of electronics here, an enhancement to the mechanics of the internal combustion engine and its drivetrain with an electronic switch where it would give you extra range. And I just wrote up a story about the Leaky Highway on Oahu and this Austin Healey. Well, that got just too expensive to own. So I transitioned over to, I sold the Austin Healey. The MG became known as the Blue Harpoon out of Mystic, Connecticut. And also, the Blue Harpoon was the first car that I did a cross-country trip in. It made it to Bologee, Alabama, from San Diego to Bologee, Alabama, when the engine blew up. And I can remember the cop that came to render assistance. He says, "Well, boy, you in a heap of trouble." And I was kind of, because you can see the MG had Hawaiian license plate on it, and I had a California driver's license. And I was going from west to east through Alabama. So, yeah, it took a little while to convince him that military ID helped. But, yeah, he got me into his brother's business, which was a gas station with a U-Haul contract. So we pushed the MG into the back of the U-Haul, and I finished my trip across country. Now, in Calypso, I haven't had any troubles like that. And you can read about that and see the videos of my cross-country trips on the trips page of my website. But moving onwards and upwards, the car in purple is my move to Corvettes. That's the C4 Corvette that I got when I turned 50 years old. So here I am in my 70s now, and I started driving Corvettes when I was 50, and it started off with the C4. Now, this picture was taken on a key day because I got rid of the C4 and I moved over to the C5. And that's the C5 that I'm leaning on in this picture. So that's the most reliable car I ever owned, was that C5. And let's get back around. Now that you've gone through the evolution of the cars up to Calypso, this is when I started thinking about what my next car would be. And the concept of an EV car became real. Okay, so I'm going to play some of the commercials of the prior generation Corvette, so you can get a feel for the evolution, my evolution with Corvette, from the first introduction, personal introduction, the C4, and excuse me, the 64, and then the C4, and then the C5. So I was growing my love of cars and technology in parallel to the development of the Corvettes themselves and their subsequent generations, all the way up to the decision for Calypso. I think you can see the parallel courses of both GM and Chevrolet, and my own life and my own love of cars that started back 1953 and have come up to the present day. In 2012, 2013, 2014, I went through that whole procurement process that you can see on the podcast. I go into great depth, but this is a topic that I haven't covered before, is my thinking about EVs. I was looking at two other cars in 2012, 2013, knowing the technology trend that was taking place. I had seen the technology back from my memories of the 64 through my ownership of a C4 and my ownership of the C5. I had seen the technology and the electronics coming into play, not for the sake of propulsion, but with the Tesla. I have two friends that own Teslas. They think they're great. And I was thinking long and hard about a Tesla, but I really wanted a sports car. And it didn't exist, in my opinion, at that point in time. Not track proven, okay, sports car. So there was a little bit of that track aspect, and my experience with the C4, boy, I'll tell you, it handled the track great. The C5 was a little bit more comfort oriented. It was more of something that Wendy wouldn't object to going right. She hated the C4. It was too brutal. The C5 was much more docile, but it could still be a track car. But I didn't feel that that was the right car for it. So I was looking for something I could do some track time on. And so the thought, I looked at a Cadillac, I looked at Tesla, I was looking all over the place for what would be my next car. Technology was pushing me towards the EV, but there's nothing like an internal combustion engine for the sense of power, the sound, the feel. And yeah, I went with the C7 Calypso for that purpose. Now, the YouTube video that I saw, and that John's probably going to pick up on if he does a podcast on this. Even I'm 70, so from 53 to now, okay, that's 67 years of development, similar to the Corvette, and they're making the leap. They're going to make the leap to EV. Will I go? No. I'm sticking with the C7 internal combustion engine because that's who I am. From 1953, I love cars. This is the way it's going to be. And it's an inheritance for the kids. So there you go. There's my intro to the video. It's only 8 minutes long. This one's 20 some minutes long. And when John gets a hold of it, if he ties it into his EV discussion, it'll be longer yet. So this is my portion. Thanks for listening.